We are all a little depraved and debaucherous. Here is the king of podcasts.
And welcome to the program, King of Podcasts, here with you. On another program, we're going to talk about sugar daddies. Once again, hey, can't help get enough of it. And it's not like I'm trying to go ahead and put out clickbait on a regular basis, but you know what? Some interesting studies and research are being done on it. And every time it keeps coming out, I can't help myself but go ahead and bring it up. The openness of people around the world to sugar daddies and sugar babies and sugar dating in general. We're going to talk all about that tonight. Quite a world-renowned study, or world surrounding study, if you will. Interesting enough, Seeking.com, for whatever reason, they do a thing where if you have been a subscription holder before, and maybe this is for everybody out there, but every 3 months or so, I've been getting messages from them where they offer you a free hour to peruse the site, send messages, get messages, and do whatever you want. And let me tell you, that's a testament in two ways. Because Seeking.com, you can get a lot of responses in 1 hour. A lot. Depending on what you want to go and put out there. But when you go on that site, which is normally, $125, I think it is, a month? Or, yeah, something like that. And then with the discount, they normally drop in every once in a while. I think it's $109 now. And I think it's $79 once you get the 25% discount that they usually drop in. And that's usually like a quarterly thing. So for Valentine's Day, for Christmas, for, whatever. They do that kind of thing all the time. And what they've been doing now, because they know people are kind of a little bit addictive to it, they'll offer, you can claim a free hour. And then they did that once on the site. And then when you got that, you click on it. It'll tell you payment received, but you're not paying anything. You're just getting that free hour. And it's opened up. And you go have at it. Respond to who you want. If you had past messages that are still up there after 6 months, you can go and look for them as well. Whatever you want. Or anybody that actually might have reached out to you, messaged you, or might have viewed you, favorited you, whatever. You get to go and look at all that. Because Seeking.com still, at the end of the day, is the highest quality of the sugar daddy sites there is. They are the top ones. Period. And then what they did this time was they actually opened up the chance to claim an hour several times. So I actually got a chance to go on another time. I got 2 hours worth of access. And I got a bunch of messages back and, talking back and forth. Great. And it's amazing how much influence that they have right there. But Seeking, it's a pretty daring thing for them when they charge so much at a premium for their services. And at the premium, if you have a profile ready and you click on claim, then you're up and at it. And it doesn't take much time to go and send messages. And, some of us are just kind of cheap and bargaining. Like we're just not waiting to go and do messages back and forth. But some of these women are online, and if they see a message, they immediately, because they have the app or they're watching online, and they get a message and they get it notified quickly, they will respond right back. I can't tell you how many responses you get back, but I can tell you for myself, every time I got on there for an hour and I just sent a message, maybe 40 messages back in an hour. Really, it was just about how much time do I have to send messages out, and that's it. Here's my Telegram. Here's my Snapchat. Done. Here's my WhatsApp. Done. And it's just like that. And then I have different people to talk to. But it's amazing. And remember, not all the people on Seeking.com are looking for arrangements. They're looking for relationships. Because of the set that I actually responded with this time around, when you break it deep down to them, you'll realize, no, they're not necessarily like the arrangement is something that's an addendum. That's just an extra perk. But the truth is they are looking for love. They are looking for relationships. They're also looking for companionship. So, and as I say, when you look at the study itself, up a good 50 to 60% of respondents are probably going on the site because they're looking for something transactional. And there's nothing wrong with that. If they're going to want to choose that, that's their choice. So into the story that gets us into today, the openness that we have. A new study was put out and included nearly 100 researchers from around the globe lighting on the individual and cultural factors that influences one's openness to sugar relationships. Because remember, sugar dating is worldwide. Worldwide. I can tell you that because of being on these sites, I have spoken with women from various continents: Australia, New Zealand, Africa, Asia, Europe, and North America, and South America. Right? You're getting all that. And for the various countries, same thing. You also can be really surprised on how many English-speaking people there are in other countries that go on this site, that know about this site. It's world-renowned, Seeking.com. Among other sugar daddy sites. Just saying. So this is a worldwide phenomenon. The research is the largest investigation to date of attitudes toward sugar relationships and offers unprecedented insights into how economic conditions, societal norms, psychological traits, and cultural values converge to shape perceptions and accept these arrangements. The other thing, too, is this. For those that are out there that just want to do something virtual, okay, you could go ahead and meet someone from another country. And if you realize, okay, if they're looking for money, you can realize that in some cases, some of the women you might talk to, they're in other countries. If you want to do the whole passport bros thing, you already know there's not much of an investment necessary when you go ahead and just take the flight to a particular country. And then you know that your money is going to go a lot farther because the American dollar goes out so much, or the Canadian dollar, or the euro, what have you. But then you look at that and you say to yourself, okay, Philippines? How about any country in Africa? How about South Africa? How about, Australia, New Zealand? How about pick it? And, either Dominican Republic or Colombia or Venezuela. Think about it. There's all these places that have a value that value the American dollar so highly that when you go and send something out there, think of how much you're going to get out of it for doing that. Just think about that. It's amazing. Now, that's the thing you got to think about. If you were looking to do anything of Passport Bros, put it like this. The Passport Bros, if you're looking to go ahead and get yourself out there to experience women in other countries, it's a very small investment to put in to communicate over there. And what you do is you might make a friend, a companion, somebody that could be a tour guide to you when you go to one of these countries. And then you'll get introduced to other women or other people. And then you'll realize, okay, you'll get an idea of the culture, idea of the people, idea of everything. And with somebody that you'll have time to get to know so that you can absolutely have somebody that's somewhat of a trusted guide to show you around. As long as you know you're not getting catfished. And as long as you know that you're going on and talking to people that you don't realize, oh, something's going on here. Now, in this story, sugar dating, we already know a lot about it. And the thing is, PsyPost decides to go and give a bit of an explanation, which we're going to kind of skip. But they go on to say that these arrangements have evolved in the digital age, facilitated by specialized dating sites and social media platforms, making them more visible and accessible. Despite the historical prevalence of transactional relationships for material gain, modern sugar, so this is the world's oldest profession, prostitution, escorting. Modern sugar relationships are often stigmatized and poorly understood. So they're examining the relationships across a wide range of cultures and demographics. And researchers aim to shed light on the motivations behind engaging in sugar arrangements, how societal norms and economic factors influence their acceptance, and the psychological traits associated with participants. And one of the people they talked to is Norbert Mesko, an associate professor at the University of Pix. And he says there's a relatively large amount of media coverage about sugar relationships these days, but the psychological context of openness has not been studied much. Well, if you want anybody that's going to give you the case study, right here, buddy, Depraved and Debaucherous. This program almost every week. So in general, they're interested in the psychological context of openness in these exchanges for sex, for resources, type encounters. Now, they're not all that way. But yeah, there is something where I put it like this. When you look at what's being done in terms of being in one of these arrangements or relationships, you want to call it that way. The thing is that we've talked about it before. Not all relationships are sexual. We know that in the last study we talked about. And I can go and pull that back up again of what they said about it. Because, it doesn't really necessarily be that way. I mean, you can think that it is, but you know what? If we go back and look at what was said previously, when we talked about this last time, you know, it wasn't so much as you would say as it was. But I understand where some people feel like, oh, you know, that people feel like they go back to this before and what it means to go and go through about the feelings of that people can actually be romantically involved if they're into this at all. I mean, I get that part that we've gone to that before. You can feel like, okay, if you don't feel like it's something that's for you, that's fine. But we talked about it about a month ago, 5 weeks ago. We talked about the psychology of sugar dating. Let me go back to the study again and just some of the stats they actually talked about this. Remember, they talked to 45 women, 31 men, and one non-binary individual. And remember what we talked about? The age ranges for the sugar daddies, they were average age 48 years old. For the babies, they were 20 years old, about 29 years old. And they said here that sugar babies engaged in 4 sugar dating arrangements throughout their lifetime, with a range that spanned from 1 to 50. That's the babies. And then for the benefactors, it's a different story. Over 6 arrangements, highlighting a potentially greater propensity among benefactors to engage in multiple or sequential sugar dating relationships. 1/3 of the sugar babies indicate a history of engaging in other transactional sex work, such as stripping, selling content, or other online webcam services, or traditional sex work. 1/3. And then they also mentioned the motivations. They said that, you know, primary motivation for sugar babies into these arrangements was financial compensation, aligning with the expectations about the transactional nature of sugar dating. Then they went on and said in the story that the misconception you can receive gifts or money just to text someone without any sort of sexual activity, this does just not hold true. If not all sugar arrangements involve some extra level of sexual exchange, which typically coincides with a level of intimacy or emotional connection, as well as a dating component where sugar partners spend time together outside of the bedroom. So there's more to it, and there were the intentions that were brought up in this story. And when they talked about in the study, among the 77 respondents, there was still a social stigma still attached to sugar dating. But that's probably more or less in North America, because I don't know where they said where all these 77 individuals came from, but that's a considerable interesting point. Now, back to this here of the openness. The initial sample of the study has 118,324 participants. Let me read that again. 118,324 initial participants. 176 countries. That's like basically every country in the world. I think it was like 250 countries. 176 countries. And then they ensured quality and reliability of the data with stringent inclusion criteria. Excluding participants who failed attention checks, common method used in surveys to ensure that respondents are paying attention to the questions rather than randomly answering. And language subsamples did not reach a minimum of 100 participants were also excluded. So then they narrowed it down. 69,924 individuals, 87 countries, and one of the surveys was done in 37 languages. Wow. So they go through gender dynamics and sugar relationships. Who's more open to sugar relationships? Men. Men, both young and older, exhibited a higher acceptance of sugar relationships compared to women. The gender disparity highlights the social and evolutionary underpinnings of sugar relationships, suggesting that the traditional dynamics of male resource provision and female selection, based on resource availability, still influence modern relationship preferences. So what they're saying right now is guys are looking for potential suitable partners or women that fit what they want, or they will be able to provide what they're looking for in terms of return of their investment. And if they can't find it within the local, within their own local circle, or just even in the nation, they'll go outside of the world and go out looking somewhere else, because there are plenty of beautiful women that will serve a better purpose for a man like him, a single successful guy, more than anybody else. And adherence to traditional gender roles was positively associated with acceptance of sugar relationships. Adhering to traditional gender roles. So keep that in mind. So it can be straight or gay, but gender roles are traditional. So it's really not so much for transgender, even though there are quite a few transgender that are on sugar dating sites. Don't know what the acceptance rate they have right now or how well they succeed, but more than not, adherence is positively associated with acceptance of sugar relationships. So these individuals who endorse traditional views about the roles of men and women in society are more likely to view sugar relationships more favorably. So for those that might be transgender, maybe sugar dating is not something that you look highly upon. And that can very well be that. But then it's also because of the fact that, just online, I can imagine that there's a difficulty trying to find someone that it's very accepting. I mean, not everyone is accepting of transgender or just gender affirmation and going through what genders or pronouns somebody might have. The traditional, and I'm not here to go and dispute or anything like that. I'm just reading what the study says. The correlation can be understood in the context of the traditional gender role expectation. Men are seen as providers, women are as caretakers or recipients of provision. Now, in the traditional gender roles, even if it's somebody who's gay or straight, let's just put it like this. The more dominant of the partners are seen as providers, and the more submissive are more the caretakers or recipients of provision. And sugar relationships, which typically an older, wealthier man provides for a younger woman, mirrors these traditional roles. They also looked at the role of socio-sexual orientation, where individuals with a more restricted socio-sexual orientation open to casual sex without the need for emotional closeness. So this is where friends with benefits, as opposed to actually having a relationship, they were more likely to accept sugar relationships. So yeah, folks with friends with benefits or just hookup culture is more acceptable and more familiar or reliable for those looking at sugar relationships. They have a better idea of it, and they have a better opinion of it, basically. So some sugar relationships may be seen as an extension of their general openness to casual sexual experiences rather than a distinct or separate from a relationship. Remember, friends with benefits is friends with benefits, and the benefits is the same idea as a sugar dating. Same idea as a sugar daddy or sugar baby, in the same vein. And people need to go and realize that. So if you are in a friends with benefits relationship, it's the same idea. The benefits are not just sexual. You can't just say it is. Because there are quite a few times where money is involved. Transactional. But if you're friends with benefits, it's a personal, it's physical, it's actually in real life. And a much more accepted form of sugar relationship because people are not talking about it as much or as such. Plus, it's also the fact that if you're close to each other, then it's more of an on-call deal than it is having something that's much more consistent and more interaction on a daily basis, which sugar relationships have more of. And there was a positive correlation found between parasite stress and openness to sugar relationships, both in individual and country levels. So regions with higher levels of infectious diseases or individuals with a history of parasitic infections have a greater acceptance or inclination towards engaging in sugar relationships. So yeah, people that, live in areas that probably are poverty stricken or, infectious diseases or venereal diseases or sexually transmitted diseases are probably much more prominent or much easier to contact. Right? They're more engaging in sugar relationships. So, if you go to another country and you're going to one of those countries like a passport bro, you are taking the possibility of meeting a woman that might contract sexually transmitted disease from something that she did because you might be going with someone that might be pretty sexually active. Or they're not, or just the conditions are in a place where maybe hospitals are just not that effective. And, what kind of shots they might have or anything like that. You never know. Very interesting that you talk about this. Now, culture, economic inequality, and development. This is the part I talk about. This is the passport bros thing, okay? For those that there's an appreciation for someone that might be rich or wealthier when a dollar goes a longer way in another country. Okay. When you compare, let's say, okay, South Africa has the rand, or, Dominican has the pesos, right? Or Colombia has the pesos, I think, as well. And you think about how much those dollars really are worth when you take, a couple $100 to another country and how well it does. I can tell you how, like in Africa, in some countries, like say, Kenya or Nigeria or Senegal, like the real African countries, right? That those markets, $20 might be enough to go and pay for rent for a room for somebody for a month. I mean, that's cheap, but look at the conditions they're in. So cultural factors play a significant role in shaping attitudes towards sugar relationships. Variations in acceptance across different cultures, with individuals from collectivist societies less open to sugar relationships. So their societal norms and values prioritizing group harmony and disapprove of relationships perceived as transactional and non-traditional. So cultures that are, very collectivist, like it's very traditional, very strict. Maybe religion is a factor to it. There's a reason where there's a disapproval of relationships as transactional or non-traditional. But then there's economic and social factors, gender inequality, social welfare, being influential. Regions with higher gender inequality and lower levels of social welfare, sugar relationships were more accepted. So let's put it like this. When there's more suitable women than there are men, because men in some of those climates, in some of those countries, they're traditional. They might be macho, they might be narcissistic, egotistical, manipulative, or just be, cheaters, or they just might be, womanizers. Jamaica's like that. South Africa's like that. Let's say Dominican Republic is like that. Colombia is like that. India is very much like that. Because you look at the ratio of beautiful women, and then you also see like how some of the men come out and how they look. Like when you go to India, like how many guys do you see that look, they're really attractive and have a certain look where there are enough suitable partners out there for women to find? When you find all these Bollywood actresses and all these women that are in India that they're beautiful and they all have a certain look to them, but then there's not that many men that they feel like you're suitable. Are attractive in that manner. Same thing with, let's say, the Philippines. When the guys are very much, either with an Asian or Hispanic heritage, and how some of the guys that are Filipinos, you don't hear a lot about the Filipino men and the attractiveness they have. But the Filipino women, well, you're seeing Miss Universes coming out of that group. Put it like this. In some of the areas where you see Miss Universe most prominent, okay, Puerto Rico, Venezuela, South Africa, Zaire, let's talk about, as we said, the Philippines, Dominican Republic, Venezuela, Colombia. It's a bigger difference. And because the women are very much held and beautiful, and guys are not going to be looked as handsome or as much as, upstanding citizens as you would think, or gentlemen, right? Caballeros, if you will. You're probably not so much of that over there in these other countries. So economic pressures and gender dynamics might drive individuals towards these arrangements as a means of financial support or social mobility. And in contexts where traditional routes to financial security and social welfare are obstructed due to systemic inequalities, lack of opportunities, entering a sugar relationship may be perceived as a pragmatic choice. The unemployment rate in South Africa is 30% right now. 30% of South Africans are unemployed. So women that are looking to try to find themselves a career, and it's hard to go and find work, hard to find, make a living or make income. Yeah. A lot of South African women on sugar daddy sites seeking out and accepting of sugar relationships. Just saying that. And the researchers found a positive correlation between the Human Development Index and acceptance of sugar relationships. So individuals in countries with higher levels of human development, income, education, life expectancy may be more open to engaging in or accepting sugar relationships than previously thought. More modern first world countries. Basically that idea. They're more accepting of sugar relationships, but they're more of the dominating and the more dynamic factor because they're in a position of leverage where they can leverage more of what they can get from it. And here's the part I talked about before. As many times, and this is something I've talked about many times in the program when it comes to sugar daddies and sugar babies. the reasons that some women are brought into sugar relationships in the first place, because of the amount of trauma they suffered leading into this, to where they feel like, well, now we're in this point. So here's what we got. The dark triad, personality traits in sugar relationships. This is important. There are positive attitudes between sugar relationships and traits commonly found between the dark triad: Machiavellianism, narcissism, subclinical psychopathy. So like borderline personalities. So manipulativeness, a lack of empathy, egoism, strategic, often exploitative approach to interpersonal relationships, positively correlated with openness to engaging in sugar relationships, both for the perspective of the sugar baby and the sugar provider. So here's the thing. More openness to sugar relationships by men who are Machiavellian-like. They're very egotistical, very much like Napoleon complex, right? Narcissistic, subclinical psychopathy. So they could be psychopaths. They could be, sociopaths. They could be narcissistic, manipulative, controlling, and unfaithful. They could characterize, they could use manipulation, empathy, lack of empathy, egotism, and an approach exploitative to exploit interpersonal relationships. They might be more open to being sugar daddies. Plus, you might find women that are also in the same vein as sugar babies, because let's just put it like this, there are a lot of findoms on there. Financial dominatrixes are prominent. And one thing I tell you, for the most part, out of some of the sugar babies I've actually communicated with, what they don't realize is, they don't know they're findoms. They don't realize that, you don't care about anything, a human component, when it comes to the person you're talking to. You don't really care about the person that you feel like, you might feel, if you're on there and a woman really exhibits pretty privilege, or they just feel like, they feel like they deserve more, and they've had bad relationships themselves. They had their own trauma, but of course they've untreated, no therapy, nothing about it. They just continue to go and, empower themselves by thinking, they just need to be hard-nosed, ignorant, stubborn, and just expect money, and just like a privilege. Or it's an honor for a guy to be privileged to be spending money on them and get nothing in return. Complete simp fin-dom relationships. Now, that's fine if you want to have that kind of financial situation, but it is part of this border personality disorder. The same where men can have these kind of traits, and the trauma could continue with a sugar daddy or a sugar baby, but it happens here because there are positive attitudes for those in these sugar relationships. So when you're on the sugar daddy sites, as a sugar daddy or sugar baby, you need to be able to identify that some people might be in the spectrum. They might be borderline personality disorder. They might exhibit Machiavellianism, narcissism, subclinical psychopathy. Just keep that in mind. It's very true. Don't deny it. And then the correlation suggests individuals who exhibit higher levels of dark triad traits may be more inclined to view relationships through a pragmatic or instrumental lens. Sugar relationships are opportunities to advance their interests or gain material benefits, like basically blackmail. I'm giving you this money, now you need to just act this way. So like basically taking one or a guy hostage and controlling them, just like it would be anybody else, with money being the main modus operandi. Professor Mesko makes the point that what's probably common to the sugar relationships that seem so fashionable in the Western world today, as well as compared to the compensated dating known in the East, or the transactional sex known in Africa, the treatment of female sexuality as a commodity. And there is an anonymous reviewer that raised concerns about the term sugar relationship might also have affected participants' understanding and responses. Participants from cultures where the term sugar relationship is not commonly used might have interpreted the questionnaire differently from those in cultures where the term is well known. And Mesko goes on to say that many intimate arrangements cross-culturally and throughout history were also about an exchange of resources, irrespective of the form of relationship. And research did not focus on the question of how these arrangements relate to the sugar relationships or what distinctions can be drawn to them. But what we're talking about here is a lot of people are very open and very interested and are engaged in sugar relationships or sugar dating sites, in person, virtually, online, whatever. And then Professor Mesko goes on to say about it's important to raise young people's awareness of the many dangers of being involved in a sugar relationship. Indeed, some anti-sex industry organizations argue that being involved in sugar relationships gives young people the opportunity to become victims rather than financial independence while at university. Because in college, some women might feel the need of, to pay bills or loans or just to get a little bit ahead of what their financial situation is. We talked about the women that, can't make it on the money that they're making and are more in debt and more stuck in, not being able to have a place to rent after a while, that they'll become victims rather than financially independent while at university. That's what they're saying right there. So there are dangers. And it's not what you think normally. It's just the fact that for some women that decide, well, they've been in traumatic relationships, toxic relationships. They've been, gone through various emotional trauma, being violated sexually, emotionally, physically, all of that, emotionally broken. And to think that being a sugar baby, looking for a sugar daddy is the route to go. Some people are just going to go with it. That's just the way the world is. But there's some women out there, it's fine to do it if you're in the right mindset. If you are emotionally healthy and you realize you don't want to put a relationship into this, you want to make it transactional, that's fine. If you do want to have a relationship with it, then just realize that, the ramifications as to what you're doing here by getting into a sugar relationship, and then you want to convert it into a regular relationship. It happens. It's been done, but you have to have some realistic aspirations and goals when you do that. Keep that in mind. So the study is called Exploring Attitudes Towards Sugar Relationships Across 87 Countries, a global perspective on exchanges of resources for sex and companionship. You know what? One of these days, I might just go farther into the study because it is absolutely interesting. So I'm going to hold on to this, and maybe we'll get to this another time and talk about it. But I want to keep an eye on this, and maybe we'll get back to this another time and see what more they find out. But that's the show for tonight. And I appreciate all of you for listening to the program and hearing this out on sugar babies and sugar daddies. And you realize that, you know what? More people around the world than you imagine are really open to the idea of getting in and hooking up and getting to these transactional relationships or whatever they want. And just realizing that, hey, you want to get into a sugar relationship, who are you getting in with? You got to ask yourself, are they crazy? Are they in it for the right reasons? And are they depraved and debaucherous?